Following up, Jim, and the panel this morning, I think, is it's really a privilege to be here, and I want to thank Texan by Nature and all the partners that came together for this gathering and the opportunity to talk about conservation cooperatives, developing this shared vision for landscape scale conservation. I think that's what we've heard for the last day and a half. And you bring these ideas together. How do you keep that fire burning? How do you maintain that coordinated effort to build that shared vision for how we want our landscape to be tomorrow and in the future? Like they said, what we have is now, and now is the time to work on this shared vision. The intent of my presentation is just to give you a general overview of what a landscape conservation cooperative is all about. A conservation cooperative, again, it's building that shared vision of how we can deal with the difficulties of what I would call a very complex landscape from Canada to Mexico, for monarch butterflies, for grassland birds. How do we build that shared vision among urban dwellers as well as the rural landowners? The discussion yesterday that came out from the First Lady and Texan by Nature, a science-based community of practices, a science-based conservation cooperative of people with a focus on where we see tomorrow and the future going. And dealing with all species. How do we deal with monarchs in grasslands, on private lands, rural lands, as well as in cities? This huge elephant in the room of how big are our cities getting? And do we just avoid those? We have to find a way to use our available science and our planning efforts to look at an example that I'll talk about here in Austin itself. So again, this cooperative vision, this conservation cooperative vision that we have in the Gulf Coast Prairie, which is a partnership of 18 organizations and agencies that cover 5 states and some into Mexico. We haven't developed that relationship as much as we should have, but again, it's a sustainable landscape of natural and cultural resources. I love the concept that came up earlier this morning about it's not just natural resources. It's our culture. It's our background. It's where we came from and where we want to maintain that heritage that we call the Southern Great Plains. We want a geography that's resilient to all of these things that are hitting us at every side now, the siphons of water going into our ground, all the needs for things that we have to build the shared vision. Where do we want to go? Our mission is a collaborative science support partnership, providing that platform for shared science information across all agencies and organizations to share that scientific knowledge, leverage resources, and work towards those common landscape goals. That's our vision and that's our mission. And so with that vision and that mission, we talk about where we work in this conservation cooperative. It was a vision by people that thought there needed to be a broader science-based effort to pool resources using ecological areas like the Gulf Coast Prairie and the Oaks and Prairie joint venture to pool resources, leverage those resources, and use science. And the Gulf Coast Prairie, the light blue there, is that's the area that we're dealing with right now. And if you go through that zone, that is our southern plain zone for important to monarchs and grassland birds as they funnel through. And working with other conservation cooperatives to our east, to our west, we all work together. There's no hard line that separates us. Many of us share partners, share resources, and what I'll talk about here in a little bit about the Austin project ecological places and cities is just that. It was a concept of multiple cooperatives to work across a much broader landscape. So this landscape scale approach for Monarchs, linking Canada to Mexico, a gateway here in Texas, we have to plan for people among these complex habitats. Both rural and urban settings are needed to provide what we talked about yesterday, connectivity and patch size. We have to determine what those are, connectivity and patch size for our habitats along that Monarch Highway. The challenge is great and the resources are few. There's never been a time when we're flush with conservation money. And what I learned long ago is those conservation dollars are precious. We have to use them the most efficient way we can today and in tomorrow. We have to find the right people to use that to get the best product. There's only one Texas, and we don't have the opportunity to test. We need to do it right, and we need to do it now. In this landscape, planning is both a process and a product. You have to keep people engaged. There's always people, new people coming in. There's people leaving. You have to maintain that conservation communication. And the product itself is that vision, that conservation vision. Sometimes it's a map. Sometimes it's a collaboration of people like this developing through facilitated efforts a better way to do business with the science that we have. We have to assess these current conditions, look at our vulnerabilities, figure out where are these best places to develop those desired future conditions we think are spatially explicit targets for conservation. The word target came up yesterday, it's coming up today. It continues to be something that's science-based, that has to be spatially explicit, where we document where, how much, and when we do that work. And it directs management options both in the cities and the working lands. And what we're talking about is not just for Monarchs, but let's talk about a Monarch community of practice. It builds all those resources in the southern Great Plains under that common shared vision, bringing people together from all walks and focusing on working lands and urban communities. It's important we keep that working lands in perspective, because when we talk about the Southern Plains, just a few percentage points are where we're at with public trust lands. What we're talking about are private lands and good stewards, like we heard this morning, that can provide that landscape. That statistic, only less than 10% own over 80% of the land, is a way we can make some hay, but no pun intended, but we need to work with urban communities as well. And that's where we talk about this landscape level perspective, from Canada to Mexico, looking at the places where we live, work, and play for creating habitat and that benefits both people, pollinators, and grassland birds. So we know that nature thrives on our working lands, but working lands are dwindling. We heard that yesterday, we heard that today. I love the, I'm gonna found that sign just west of the Wichita Refuge in Oklahoma, so you'll get a kick out of that. No trespassing, no hunting, no arrowhead hunting, no firewood or post cutting, on and on and on. It was definitely stay off the land. But again, working lands are dwindling, and we need to continue to understand how we can build that. But we also need to know that cities need nature. Does nature need cities has been the question. And this is what I'd like to talk about the next few minutes, how we get a better handle on the elephant in the room. As conservationists, my whole career, we've avoided urban areas. We always put a hole in the map and said we don't work there. We always work on the rural lands. But we have to find a way to get to that 80 or 90% of the population to make conservation relevant to the people of this state and of America. science is good, and we need science, and they need to know conservation is good, and they need conservation. So with this concept, the Monarchs' view of the city came up. And again, a collaborative urban effort in the mid-continent. It was based out of the Chicago Field Museum, working with a number of partners in the conservation cooperative world, the joint ventures, the Monarch joint venture. And it's what Chip talked about earlier, that I-35 corridor that's critical from Canada to Mexico, with key cities involved that are in this urban planning effort. And I'm going to highlight the Austin since we're here today. As you can see, these 4 cities were chosen as a pilot. We worked through Austin last year with a number of partners, and Katie will talk later, I'm sure, about some of the work that was done last summer, the data that was collected. But the 5-county municipal area is where they centered that work. And some of the information that came up was very revealing. And we can use that to build that shared vision and how to improve our habitat opportunities for monarch. The scenario modeling effort that came from the data that was collected shows with different elements of adoption what we can do to help meet some of these scientifically based targets for milkweed stems per acre. The products that have come from this urban monarch effort is a guidebook. This material is coming out right now, a social survey, best practices for land use types, and then these milkweed baseline tools, urban scenario tool, and the rapid color guide for creating monarch habitat gardens. But again, our partner to the northeast, the Tallgrass Prairie Landscape Cooperative, has all this on their website, and you can pull that together. So in summary, today, this landscape scale planning, again, is a requirement for working lands and cities. It takes collaboration, constant collaboration, communication, and science. Building on this Monarch Community of Practice concept as a science-based planning and translation for all to understand better about how much habitat is needed and where is that habitat needed in both rural, suburban, and our urban city dweller areas. So we have to be forward-thinking, and we have to continue to work together through platforms like this to maintain our communication and our next steps forward. So with that, I just want to stress that what Ed brought up yesterday about the Midwest Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies, their plan, our strategy, how do we link with that here in Texas and Oklahoma? There's a real opportunity for us to move forward with the Monarch Fund, the National Fish and Wildlife Federation efforts that Todd Hogarth talked about yesterday, and develop those science-based targets, both for rural lands and the cities, and continue to collaborate more often and regularly. So with that, I will say thank you again for the time and be glad to talk to you after.